Hi, man.
Hi, folks. How's this on the audio? You guys can hear me well? Thank you for having me here. I guess my clock started, so I'll get into it. My name's Aneesh. I'm here to tell you a little bit about my company called Aire. We are 5 years old. Aire ultimately started for a simple purpose for me, which was quite a personal mission. How do I make my problem, which I believe is also a problem shared by millions of people and perhaps billions, solved? And this statement has been a purpose or a mission statement for us for many years. And it seems a bit unusual because both statements contradict each other. But today, over the course of the next few minutes, I'll talk to you about this and I'll show you what we're trying to do in solving both sides of this equation. So, how many of you know about consumer credit? Getting a mortgage, getting loans, getting credit cards, car loans. Typically, it's not been a fun process for most consumers. And nobody has ever told me that they love what they see about their credit score. There's always gaps, there's always confusion, there's always questions. And the problem has been that when it was built, a lot of the system traces its history back to the 50s and 1960s. We use simple metrics, which were historical. Now, historical metrics are good because that's what they could use back then, but it doesn't tell the full picture. And that's one of the things we wanted to solve at Aire. If you look at the new world that exists out there, I fit into this, I know a lot of you fit into this, I know all of your families and friends fit into this. I call this the new world reality. People who are contractors, self-employed, founders, people who work in the gig economy, people who move around, the mobile from an education perspective, from a professional perspective. How do you build the financial services that they need? And this economy is only growing. And the more we looked at it, we realized the challenges faced by these individuals cannot be solved by taking traditional historical data and applying traditional techniques. You had to bring new data into the equation. You have to bring new thinking in the equation. And one of the things we championed was the idea of context. What is context? Well, the human brain is really good at understanding context. See, what happens with context is you're able to take different parts of a data ecosystem or different realities and put them together and analyze them from different angles. It's one of the challenges of traditional linear math. And this was a problem we saw in the existing credit ecosystem. A lot of those scores, a lot of the techniques that were being built and used were still relying on very traditional math. And therefore, when you looked at these new consumers, many of them had multiple income streams, many of them had different lifestyles to what was expected. They don't have the perfect 2.3 kids. They don't live in the same area for 40 years. They don't even have the same job for 14 years. How do you take their reality? How do you solve that equation for them? And how do you give them a chance in getting access to financial services? Because all of us need to be at the same starting line. And that's when we started the work around Aire. So over the last 5 years, we've been trying to decouple and understand, how do you take an individual? How do you take their story? How do you take the data about themselves? And how do you give them a chance to represent that data to us? How do you bring the consumer back in the equation? Because sadly, what I found was, even myself, I didn't have a chance to build my own credit score. Imagine writing your CV, your resume, not being given a chance to write your CV or resume before it shows up at an employer. That's ridiculous. Nobody would do that. But that sadly was happening with credit scores. And that's the work we've been doing. And these are some of the stories that we've been able to unlock. Let's see what happens next, right? So obviously I have a few minutes here, so I'm not going to talk about all the math and all the underlying data here. But one of the things we've been really focused on is this idea that when you take additional data, and I remember there was a presenter early on today who talked about dimensionality. Now that's really interesting because largely what we've been doing is bringing new data, we call it first-party data, which is the data that the consumer can unlock, and bringing it to the score, and that allows us to build better scores. This is how some of the process works. It's all online. It's all integrated for the consumer. Ultimately, there is machine learning at the heart. I'm not going to bore you with buzzwords today, but the biggest difference we make is we give the consumer a chance to represent themselves. We've been running for a few years. Again, some more stories here that I can show you and we can share about outside. And it's taken a while because this isn't an easy problem to solve. There are regulations. We were the first company in 2016 to get regulated in the space of being a credit reference bureau. We have major partnerships we've signed along the years. And all of this is towards that idea that one day we can allow people to have the credit they need, but stop them from falling into the debt problem that comes with it. So that's the mission we're on. Come support us.